The rock felt heavy in my trembling hand, heavier than it should have been for something so small. But I knew what it meant to use it. I knew whose car I was about to destroy. Everyone in this neighborhood knew that midnight blue Maserati, knew the man who owned it, knew what happened to people who even breathed too close to its pristine surface. But none of that mattered now. Not when I could see the small fingers pressed against the tinted window, not when I could hear the muffled cries from inside, not when every second meant that child had less air to breathe in the sweltering heat of this August afternoon. My name is Marina Volkov, and I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Or maybe, just maybe, the only choice that matters. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The sound of shattering glass cut through the summer air like a gunshot. I flinched at my own action, at the spiderweb of cracks spreading across the driver's side window, at the alarm that immediately began shrieking its protest to the entire street. My hands moved on autopilot, reaching through the broken glass, ignoring the sharp edges biting into my forearms, feeling for the door lock. Blood mixed with sweat on my skin, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the little boy inside, his face red and tear-streaked, his breathing coming in panicked gasps. "It's okay, sweetheart," I murmured, finally getting the door open and reaching for him. "I've got you. You're safe now." He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. His small body was limp with heat exhaustion as I pulled him out, cradling him against my chest. Someone had left him locked in this car, in this heat, and walked away. The thought made rage burn hotter than the sun beating down on us. "Marina, what have you done?" Mrs. Chen's voice carried from her corner store, her face pale with terror as she took in the scene. The broken window, the screaming alarm, the Maserati that everyone knew belonged to Damian Constantine, the man who controlled everything in this part of the city, from the legitimate businesses to the ones that operated in shadows. "Call 911, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This child needs medical attention." "You don't understand," Mrs. Chen whispered, wringing her hands. "That's his car. Damian Constantine's car. I don't care whose car it is," I interrupted, checking the boy's pulse. Fast but steady. A child was dying inside it. But even as I said the words, fear crept up my spine like ice water. I did know whose car it was. Everyone in Brighton Creek knew. You didn't touch Damian Constantine's possessions. You didn't even look at them too long. Men had disappeared for less than what I'd just done. But what choice did I have? Let a child die to save my own skin? The boy stirred in my arms, his eyes fluttering open. "Mama?" he whispered, confused and frightened. "Shh, it's all right," I soothed, even as my own heart hammered against my ribs. "We're getting you help." A crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the alarm and the spectacle of someone actually damaging the untouchable car. I recognized most of the faces, neighbors from our struggling neighborhood, people who worked 3 jobs just to make rent, people who understood survival meant keeping your head down and never drawing attention from men like Constantine. "You need to run," Mr. Petrov urged, his grocery bags forgotten at his feet. "Now, Marina, before he finds out." But it was already too late for running. 3 black SUVs turned onto our street with the kind of precision that spoke of military training and serious intent. They moved as a unit, boxing in the Maserati, creating a perimeter. The alarm finally died, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the little boy's soft whimpers and my own ragged breathing. Car doors opened in synchronization, and men emerged. Big men in expensive suits with dead eyes and the kind of stillness that came from absolute confidence in their ability to handle any threat. They fanned out, assessing the situation with professional detachment. But it was the last man who stepped from the center vehicle that made my blood freeze in my veins. Damien Constantine looked exactly like the rumors described, and nothing like I'd imagined. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. His suit probably cost more than my mother's medical bills for the past year. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. All sharp angles and cold beauty. But it was his eyes that truly frightened me. Gray as winter storm clouds and just as merciless. He took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. The broken window, the blood on my arms, the child in my embrace. His expression revealed nothing, but something dangerous flickered in those gray depths. "Sir," one of his men began, moving toward me with clear intent. Damien raised one hand, barely a gesture, but the man stopped immediately. That casual display of absolute authority sent a fresh wave of fear through me. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Explain," Damien said, his voice low and controlled, directed at me. Not a request, a command. I tightened my hold on the boy, as if my body could shield him from whatever was about to happen. "He was trapped inside," I said, forcing myself to meet those cold eyes. "Locked in the heat, he was dying. So you destroyed my property." "I saved a child's life." My voice didn't shake, though everything inside me was trembling. "If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." Something shifted in his expression, too subtle to read. His gaze moved to the boy in my arms, studying him with sudden intensity. "Put him down." "No." The word came out before I could stop it, before fear could override instinct. "He needs a hospital. He needs—" I said, "Put him down." Still that controlled tone, but with an edge of steel now. The boy's small hand fisted in my shirt, and I felt him trembling. Whatever this child's connection to Constantine, he was afraid of him. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man I was dealing with. "Marina," Mrs. Chen pleaded from somewhere in the crowd. "Please, just do what he says." But I couldn't. Some part of me, the part that had watched my mother fight terminal cancer with nothing but expired insurance and prayer, the part that had seen my sister get trapped in an abusive marriage with no way out, the part that understood what it meant to be powerless, that part refused to back down. "If you want to hurt me for damaging your car, fine," I said, my voice steady, despite the terror coursing through my veins. "But this child goes to a hospital first. After that, you can do whatever you want to me." Silence stretched across the street. Even the usual city sounds seemed to fade, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Damien's men exchanged glances, clearly uncertain how to handle someone who wasn't cowering before their boss. I could see them calculating, wondering if they should simply take the child by force. "Do you know who I am?" Damien asked, taking a step closer. His presence was overwhelming, commanding every ounce of attention. "Yes." I lifted my chin, refusing to look away. "Everyone knows who you are, Mr. Constantine. Everyone knows what you're capable of. But that child was locked in your car, and I won't apologize for saving his life." "His name is Alexei." Damien's voice dropped lower, and something raw flickered across his features before his mask of control slammed back into place. "He's my nephew, and he wasn't trapped. He locked himself in during a tantrum while my sister was paying for gas." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not some stranger's child abandoned to die, but his nephew, his family. I looked down at the boy, Alexei, seeing him with new eyes. The expensive clothes made sense now. So did the fear in his eyes when he looked at his uncle. This child lived in a world of power and violence that I could barely comprehend. He could have died, I said, even as relief washed through me that this hadn't been neglect. Another few minutes in that heat, I'm aware, Damien's jaw tightened. My sister was dealing with the payment system malfunction inside the store. I was 3 blocks away when she called, frantic. By the time I arrived, he gestured toward the broken window, toward me. You'd already taken matters into your own hands. I felt the crowd's collective exhale, the slight relaxation of tension. He wasn't going to kill me, at least not immediately. But as I met those storm-gray eyes again, I realized something that frightened me even more than the threat of violence. Damien Constantine was studying me with a new intensity, an interest that felt dangerous in an entirely different way. Alexei, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. Come here. The boy hesitated, then slowly disentangled himself from my arms. He walked to his uncle on unsteady legs, and I watched as Damien crouched down, checking him over with surprising gentleness. His hands that had undoubtedly done terrible things, were careful, almost tender, as they brushed the boy's sweaty hair back from his forehead. Are you hurt? Damien asked. Alexei shook his head, then burst into tears. I'm sorry, Uncle Dima. I didn't mean to lock it. I was just mad that Mama wouldn't buy me the toy, and I hit the button, and then I couldn't get out, and it got so hot. Shh! Damien pulled the boy against his chest, and I saw something crack in his carefully controlled expression, something human and vulnerable that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. You're safe now. That's all that matters. One of his men approached with a bottle of water and a first aid kit. Damien took both, tending to his nephew with practiced efficiency. I stood there, uncertain, my arms empty, and my blood still dripping from the glass cuts. Part of me wanted to run, to disappear before Constantine decided what to do about the woman who'd destroyed his property. But another part, the part that had driven me to break that window in the first place, kept me rooted to the spot. When Alexei was settled in one of the SUVs with the air conditioning blasting and a bottle of water in his hands, Damien finally turned his full attention back to me. He approached slowly, deliberately, and I forced myself not to step back, not to show the fear that was making my heart race. You're bleeding, he observed, his gaze dropping to my arms. It's nothing. It's not nothing. He opened the first aid kit, the same one he'd used for Alexei. Hold out your arms. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me not to show weakness, not to trust him. But there was something in his expression, not kindness exactly, but perhaps a grudging respect, that made me comply. I extended my arms, palms up, revealing the cuts from the broken glass. Damien's hands were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wounds, his touch clinical but careful. Up close, I could see the fine scars along his knuckles, the signs of violence that marked him as clearly as any tattoo. He smelled of expensive cologne and something darker, more dangerous. Gunpowder, maybe, or just the scent of power itself. You should have waited, he said quietly, not looking up from his work. I was 2 minutes away. You could have called 911, broken a different window, done anything other than destroy the most expensive thing on this street. A child doesn't have 2 minutes when they're trapped in a hot car, I replied, watching his hands work. Every second counts. Every degree of temperature rise brings them closer to organ failure, to death. I'm a nurse. I know what heat stroke looks like, and that boy was minutes away from critical condition. His hands paused, Just for a moment. A nurse. Nursing assistant, I corrected. Working at Brighton Creek Community Hospital. Night shift, usually, but I was on my way to cover someone's afternoon shift when I saw him. I paused, then added, I've seen children die from heat stroke. I wasn't going to let that happen today, no matter whose car it was. Damien finished bandaging my arms in silence. When he finally looked up, his gray eyes met mine with unsettling intensity. You knew whose car it was. Everyone knows whose car it is, Mr. Constantine. You're not exactly anonymous in this neighborhood. Yet, you broke the window anyway. Something like amusement flickered in his expression, despite knowing exactly what I'm capable of. Would you have preferred I let your nephew die to preserve your property? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. If that's the kind of man you are, then I misjudged the situation entirely. For a long moment, he simply stared at me. The crowd had begun to disperse, sensing that the immediate danger had passed. Mrs. Chen still watched from her store, worry etched on her face. Mr. Petrov had retreated to a safe distance, but hadn't left entirely. They were waiting to see what would happen to the foolish woman who dared to touch Damien Constantine's car. What's your name? Damien asked finally. Marina Volkov. Well, Marina Volkov. He closed the first aid kit with a decisive snap. You've created an interesting situation. On one hand, you saved my nephew's life, for which I'm grateful. On the other hand, you destroyed my property, which cannot go unanswered. My stomach dropped. I understand. What do you want? Money? Because I don't have much, but I can pay you back over time. I don't want your money. He cut me off, his voice flat. That window costs more than you'd make in 5 years. Money isn't the issue. Then what? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. What's the price for saving a child's life in your world? Something dark and unreadable crossed his features. You work night shifts at Brighton Creek Community? The change in topic threw me. Yes, 7 to 7, 4 nights a week. Family? I hesitated, uncertain where this was going. My mother. She's sick. Stage 4 cancer. She's the reason I work as much as I do. Medical bills, experimental treatments, anything that might buy her more time. Damien nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. And yet you still broke the law to save a stranger's child, despite having someone depending on you, despite knowing the risks. He wasn't a stranger, I said quietly. He was a child in danger. That's all that mattered. That kind of idealism is dangerous, Marina Volkov. But his tone had shifted, lost some of its hard edge. It gets people killed in this city. Better to die trying to save someone than to live knowing you did nothing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. You remind me of someone who believed the same thing. His expression shuddered. They're dead now. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. A warning, maybe, or just the truth of what happened to people who showed compassion in a world built on power and fear. The window will be fixed by this evening, Damien said, pulling out his phone. I'll have my people handle it. As for you, he paused, studying me with that unnerving intensity again. You'll work for me. What? The word came out sharper than I intended. I have a job. You have a mother with stage 4 cancer who needs treatments your insurance doesn't cover. His voice was matter of fact, without sympathy or cruelty, just stating reality. You have student loans from a nursing program you couldn't finish because you ran out of money. You have a landlord threatening eviction because you're 2 months behind on rent. Should I continue? Horror washed over me in cold waves. I make it my business to know things, Marina, especially about people who've caught my attention. He held up his phone, showing me a screen I couldn't quite read from this distance. I'll pay you triple what you make at the hospital. You'll work as my nephew's nurse, monitoring his health after today's incident and providing care as needed. The position comes with housing, a furnished apartment in one of my buildings, no rent. Your mother will receive the best medical care available, regardless of cost. I stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it absolutely was. And what do you get out of this arrangement, besides someone to watch your nephew? You mean besides the satisfaction of knowing the woman who destroyed my $50,000 window is in my debt? That ghost of a smile appeared again. I get someone I can trust around Alexei, someone who proved today that they value life over self-preservation. In my world, that's rarer than you might think. You don't even know me. How can you trust me? Because you're terrified right now, he said bluntly, and yet you're still arguing with me instead of simply accepting what would solve all your problems. That tells me you have integrity. It tells me you'll question things instead of blindly following orders. And it tells me you're exactly the kind of person I want around my family. I wanted to refuse. Everything in me screamed that accepting this offer would be a mistake, that getting involved with Damien Constantine would lead somewhere dark and dangerous. But he was right about everything. My mother's illness, the bills I couldn't pay, the desperation that kept me working double shifts and still falling behind. I need to think about it, I said finally. No. His tone left no room for negotiation. You've already made your choice. The moment you broke that window, you entered my world whether you wanted to or not. This way, at least, you benefit from it. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. This is coercion, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Because wasn't it also opportunity? Wasn't it exactly what I'd been praying for every night? A way to save my mother, to keep our heads above water, to stop drowning in debt and desperation? Call it what you want. Damien extended his hand, a gesture that felt more like a business transaction than a threat. Work for me. Let me provide for your mother's care, and we'll consider your debt for the window paid. Refuse, and you'll owe me $50,000 by the end of the month. Your choice. I looked at his offered hand, then passed him to where Alexei watched from the SUV, his small face pressed against the glass. The boy I'd saved. The nephew of a man who controlled this entire neighborhood through fear and money and violence. A man who was now offering me a lifeline I desperately needed but shouldn't want. My mother's face flashed through my mind, gaunt and gray, fighting a battle she was slowly losing because we couldn't afford the treatments that might save her. I thought of the eviction notice taped to our apartment door, of the collection calls I ignored, of the weight of crushing debt that made every breath feel like drowning. I took his hand. His grip was firm, controlled, his palm warm against mine. As his fingers closed around my hand, I felt the shift, the moment when my life irrevocably changed direction. When I stopped being Marina Volkov, struggling nursing assistant, and became something else, someone connected to Damien Constantine's world. Good choice, he said, releasing my hand. Someone will collect you and your belongings tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. Pack everything you'll need. You and your mother will move into the apartment I mentioned immediately. My mother. She can barely leave her bed some days. Moving her will be handled by medical professionals I'll provide, he interrupted. They'll transport her safely, and ensure she's comfortable in her new accommodations. Dr. Reeves, one of the best oncologists in the state, will begin reviewing her case tomorrow afternoon. It was happening too fast, spinning out of my control. I need to give notice at the hospital. My supervisor has already been contacted and compensated for the sudden loss of personnel. Damien's efficiency was almost frightening. Considerate, handled. You've been planning this, I realized, from the moment you saw what I did. This wasn't a split-second decision. You knew exactly what you were going to offer me. I recognized an opportunity when I saw one, he replied. I've been looking for someone trustworthy to help with Alexei since she became unable to properly care for him. You proved today that you have the qualities I need. Everything else is simply removing the obstacles that would prevent you from accepting the position. You mean removing my ability to refuse? His gray eyes held mine, unflinching. If you truly wanted to refuse, Marina, you would have. But you didn't, because you're pragmatic enough to recognize when you've been offered exactly what you need. There's no shame in accepting help, even from someone like me. Someone like him, a criminal, a man who dealt in violence and intimidation, a man whose very presence made grown adults cross the street in fear. And yet, he'd been gentle with his nephew. He'd bandaged my wounds with careful hands. He was offering to save my mother's life when the medical system had given up on her. When this goes wrong, I said quietly, when whatever you really want from me becomes clear and I realize I've made a terrible mistake, what happens then? Damien was silent for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then you'll leave, he said finally. If you ever want out, truly want out, you walk away. No retaliation, no punishment. You have my word. The word of a criminal. The word of a man who understands the value of honor, even in a dishonorable world. He turned toward the SUV, then paused. One more thing, Marina. In my world, loyalty is everything. Betray that loyalty, and even my gratitude for saving Alexei won't protect you. But honor it, and you'll find I can be extraordinarily generous. Do we understand each other? Perfectly, I replied, though understanding and accepting were two different things. As Damien's convoy pulled away, the Maserati with its shattered window loaded onto a tow truck, I stood alone on the street that had been my home for 3 years. Mrs. Chen emerged from her store, her face a mixture of concern and something that might have been respect. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, she said softly, or the most foolish. I haven't decided which. Maybe both, I admitted, looking down at my bandaged arms. The cuts would heal, but the choice I'd made today would leave scars that went much deeper. Mrs. Chen, could you do me a favor? Could you check on my mother tomorrow while I'm dealing with the move? Make sure she understands what's happening? Of course, dear. She patted my arm gently. Though I'm not sure anyone could truly understand what just happened here today. You broke Damien Constantine's car and walked away not only alive, but employed. That's not something I ever thought I'd witness. Neither did I thought, but didn't say. As I walked back to our small apartment, my mind raced with everything that had changed in the span of an hour. I'd gone to work expecting just another shift of bedpans and paperwork. Instead, I'd shattered a $50,000 window, saved a child's life, and bound myself to one of the most dangerous men in the city. My mother was awake when I entered, her thin frame barely making an impression under the worn blankets. Her eyes, still bright despite the illness ravaging her body, tracked me as I moved through the room. Marina? Her voice was weak, threads of sound. What happened to your arms? I sat on the edge of her bed, taking her frail hand in mine. Mama, something happened today. Something that's going to change everything for us. As I told her about Alexei, about the car, about Damien Constantine and his impossible offer, I watched her expression shift from worry to disbelief to something that might have been hope. It had been so long since I'd seen hope in her eyes. "This man," she said when I finished, "he's dangerous, yes?" "Yes." "But he'll help us? He'll give you work, give us a home, pay for my treatments?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "Your father, before he died, he always said you had too much heart for this world, that your compassion would either save you or destroy you." She looked up at me, tears gathering in her eyes. Today, maybe it did both. I had no answer for that, so I simply held her hand and watched the afternoon light fade through our cracked window. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would step fully into Damien Constantine's world, into a life I never asked for but desperately needed. But tonight, in this small apartment that had been our home, I allowed myself one last moment of the life I was leaving behind, the life where I was just Marina Volkov, struggling but free. Tomorrow, I would become something else, someone owned by a debt I could never truly repay, no matter what Constantine claimed. The rock I'd used to break his window still sat where I'd dropped it, a small piece of ordinary stone that had become the instrument of my transformation. I picked it up, feeling its weight, its rough surface against my palm. Such a small thing to change everything. I placed it on my dresser, a reminder of the choice I'd made. Save a child, destroy a window, alter the entire course of my life. When I closed my eyes that night, I saw Alexei's frightened face pressed against the glass, heard the sound of shattering, felt Damien Constantine's careful hands bandaging my wounds. And I wondered, not for the last time, whether I'd saved anyone today, or simply doomed us all. The apartment Damien provided wasn't just nice, it was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to use. My mother's new bedroom had been converted into a medical suite, complete with a hospital bed, monitoring equipment, and enough space for the rotating team of nurses Damien had hired to provide round-the-clock care. "This is too much," I whispered to myself, standing in the middle of the living room 3 days after that fateful afternoon. But my mother was already receiving treatment from Dr. Reeves, already looking better than she had in months, and I couldn't bring myself to feel anything but grateful, even as guilt gnawed at my conscience. Alexei bounded through the apartment like he owned it, which in a way, I supposed he did. His energy had returned fully after the incident, though he stayed close to me now, his small hand finding mine whenever uncertainty crossed his face. We'd fallen into an easy routine, mornings spent with lessons his previous tutor had outlined, afternoons in the building's private garden, evenings reading stories before bed. "Marina, can we plant flowers tomorrow?" he asked, looking up at me with eyes that reminded me too much of his uncle's. "Same intensity, same way of looking right through you. Mama used to let me help in the garden before—" He never finished that sentence. Before what, I'd wondered countless times. Before she disappeared? Before Damien took custody? Before whatever tragedy had left this child in the care of an uncle who clearly loved him but didn't know how to show it? "Of course we can," I said, brushing his dark hair back. "What kind of flowers?" "Sunflowers, really tall ones." He spread his arms wide. "So tall they touch the sky." "Then sunflowers it is." The door opened without warning, and Damien stepped inside with the same commanding presence he brought everywhere. He'd given me a key, but apparently felt no need to knock when visiting his own property. His gray eyes found me immediately. Did that quick assessment I'd learned meant he was cataloging everything: my appearance, my mood, any potential threats. "Uncle Dima!" Alexei launched himself at Damien, who caught him with practiced ease, lifting the boy into his arms. "How's my favorite troublemaker?" Damien asked, his voice softening in a way it never did with anyone else. "Marina's going to help me plant sunflowers tomorrow, the really tall kind." "Is she now?" Damien's gaze met mine over Alexei's head, something unreadable flickering in those storm cloud eyes. That sounds perfect. Watching them together always created this strange ache in my chest. Damien was gentle with Alexei in ways that contradicted everything I knew about him. Patient when the boy struggled with lessons, attentive when he needed comfort, present in ways my own father never had been, in ways Mike had never been for Emma. I stopped that thought before it could fully form. I didn't like to think about my own daughter, didn't like the guilt that came with remembering the child I'd lost in a custody battle I couldn't afford to fight. My ex-husband had money, lawyers, a respectable job. I had night shifts and desperation. The court decided Emma would have a better life with him, and I'd been forced to accept supervised visits twice a month if I could afford the travel. Damien seemed to sense my mood shift. He always did somehow. "Alexei, why don't you show Marina's mother the drawing you made today? I need to speak with Marina for a moment." The boy nodded eagerly, squirming down and racing toward my mother's room. Once he was gone, silence stretched between us. Damien moved to the window, looking out over the city he controlled, with invisible strings. "You're unhappy," he stated, not a question. "I'm grateful," I corrected, though it wasn't really a correction at all. Gratitude and happiness aren't the same thing. He turned to face me, and I was struck again by how unfairly attractive he was, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. "You think you've sold your soul to the devil." "Haven't I?" The words came out sharper than intended. "I work for a man who does things I can't even imagine, things that would horrify me if I let myself think about them too much." "Then don't think about them." His voice remained level, unbothered by my accusation. "Focus on what matters. Your mother is receiving the best care money can buy. You're not drowning in debt anymore. Alexei is thriving under your care. The rest is just noise." "Noise," I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "That's what you call it? The violence, the criminal enterprise, the fact that people are terrified of you?" "Yes." He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. "Because none of that touches you unless you let it. You're here to care for my nephew, nothing more. The rest of my world stays separate." "Does it?" I challenged, finally giving voice to the fear that had been building. "Because I've noticed the men who follow me to the market, the way people look at me differently now, like I'm something dangerous by association. Your world doesn't stay separate, Damien. It bleeds into everything." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of an uncomfortable truth. "You're more observant than I gave you credit for." "I'm not stupid, and I'm not naive enough to believe I can work for you and remain untouched by whatever darkness surrounds you." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're neither of those things, which is exactly why I need someone like you around Alexei." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "My sister, Alexei's mother, she believed the same thing you do, that she could separate the family business from her personal life, that she could raise her son in a bubble, protected from what we really are." What happened to her? I'd been wanting to ask since the first day, but fear had kept me silent. Damien's jaw tightened, his eyes going distant. She made the mistake of trusting the wrong person, someone who promised protection, who claimed to love her, who used her to get to me. His voice dropped to something raw and painful. She disappeared 6 months ago. We found her car abandoned near the river, blood on the seats. No body, no closure, just gone. The grief in his voice was so unexpected, so human, that it shattered something in my chest. "I'm sorry," I whispered, inadequate words for such devastating loss. "Don't be sorry, be smart." His eyes refocused on me with laser intensity. "Be vigilant, because the people who took her, who probably killed her, they're still out there, and they'll use anyone connected to me to hurt me again if given the chance." "Then why risk it?" I asked, fear creeping up my spine. "Why bring me and my mother here? Why let Alexei get attached to me if it puts us all in danger?" "Because isolation is its own kind of death." Damien moved to pour himself a drink from the bar cart I never used. "I won't let fear make me into the kind of man who keeps everyone at arm's length. My sister wouldn't have wanted that for Alexei. And despite everything, I still believe there are people worth trusting in this world. You barely know me." "I know enough." He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know you broke a $50,000 window without hesitation to save a child. I know you're working for a criminal to save your mother's life, and you hate yourself a little more each day for it. I know you have a daughter you lost custody of, and the pain of that loss makes you love Alexei harder, fiercer, like you can somehow make up for the child you can't protect by protecting mine." The drink I'd been holding slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. "How do you know about Emma?" "I told you. I make it my business to know things." His expression remained neutral, clinical. "Your ex-husband, Marcus Volkov, remarried 2 years ago. Your daughter lives in Connecticut now, barely remembers you because he's poisoned her against you. You save every spare penny for those twice-monthly visits, and each time you see her, she's a little more distant, a little more his daughter than yours." Tears burned behind my eyes, rage and humiliation warring in my chest. "You had no right. I had every right." He set his drink down with controlled precision. "You're caring for my nephew, living in my building, under my protection. I needed to know everything about you, every vulnerability, every pressure point, every reason someone might try to use you against me." "So this is what you do," I said, my voice shaking. "You find people who are desperate and broken, and you exploit them." "No." The word came out hard, final. "I find people who are strong enough to survive being broken, and I give them the resources to rebuild themselves. There's a difference." "Is there?" I laughed bitterly, wiping at my eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like exploitation." Damien crossed the space between us in 3 strides, and suddenly he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the flecks of blue in those gray eyes. "You want to know what exploitation looks like, Marina? It looks like your ex-husband using his money and connections to take your child away. It looks like a medical system that lets your mother die because she can't afford treatment. It looks like a city that would have let you drown in debt rather than give you a chance to breathe." His hand came up, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the ghost of contact. "What I'm offering you isn't exploitation. It's survival. It's a chance to fight back against a world that's been beating you down since the day you were born. And yes, there's a cost. There's always a cost. But at least with me, you know exactly what you're paying." I should have stepped back, should have put distance between us. Instead, I found myself frozen, caught in the gravity of his presence. And what am I paying, Damien? What's the real cost here? Your peace of mind, he said quietly. Your comfortable illusions about good and evil, right and wrong, the luxury of moral certainty. His eyes searched mine. But in return, you get your mother's life. You get stability. And maybe, if you're willing to work for it, you get a chance to see your daughter again. My breath caught. What are you talking about? Marcus Volkov, Damien's voice took on a different quality, cold and calculating. He has secrets, financial improprieties, offshore accounts, tax evasion. Nothing that would land him in prison necessarily, but enough to make a custody arrangement, renegotiable, especially if the right pressure were applied. Hope flared in my chest, dangerous and desperate. You could do that? You could help me get Emma back? I could make it possible for you to fight for her. He corrected. The rest would be up to you. But yes, Marina, I could give you what the legal system denied you, a fair chance. It was manipulation, pure and simple. Dangling exactly what I wanted most in front of me, making me complicit in whatever darkness he represented. I should have refused. Should have held on to my moral high ground. But moral high ground didn't visit my daughter. It didn't save my mother. It didn't fill the aching emptiness that had lived in my chest since Emma was taken from me. Why? I whispered. Why would you do that for me? Damien's hand finally made contact, his fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. Because I see what it's doing to you. Not being able to protect your child. I see it in the way you hold Alexei, in the way you check on him 3 times after he's already asleep, in the desperate love you pour into caring for him because you can't care for her. His thumb traced my cheekbone. And because I know what it's like to lose someone you're supposed to protect, to fail them in the ways that matter most. The vulnerability in his voice undid me. This wasn't the cold crime lord, the calculating businessman. This was a man who'd lost his sister, who was raising her son and trying not to fail him the way he felt he'd failed her. A man who understood loss and guilt and the weight of responsibility in ways that most people never would. This is dangerous, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was referring to anymore. His offer, his proximity, the way my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Everything worth having is dangerous. His voice had dropped lower, intimate. The question is whether you're brave enough to reach for it anyway. Before I could respond, before I could examine the implications of what was happening between us, Alexei's voice called from down the hall. Marina, your mama wants to show you her flowers. The spell broke. Damien stepped back, his expression shuddering back into its usual control. Think about what I said, about all of it. He left without another word, and I stood alone in the living room, my heart pounding, my mind racing. The broken glass from my dropped drink glittered on the floor like shattered stars, a perfect metaphor for the choices I was facing. That night, after Alexei was asleep and my mother was resting comfortably, I found myself unable to settle. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, touching expensive furniture, staring out windows at a city that looked beautiful from this height, cleaned of all its grime and desperation. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. Marina Volkov. A woman's voice, cultured and cold. We need to talk about your employer. Who is this? Someone who knows what Damien Constantine really is. Someone who can prove he's not the savior you think he is. A pause. Meet me tomorrow, 3 o'clock. the coffee shop on Riverside and Fifth. Come alone, and don't tell Damien. If you do, people you love will suffer." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, ice flooding my veins. This was what Damien had warned me about, the danger of being associated with him, of becoming a target. I should tell him immediately, should let his security handle whatever threat this represented. But the woman had said she could prove Damien wasn't who I thought he was, and despite everything, despite the way he'd gotten under my skin tonight, I realized I desperately wanted to know the truth. Not his version, not the carefully crafted image he presented, but the real truth about the man I was binding myself to. I spent the next day in agony, going through the motions with Alexei, while my mind raced with possibilities. What would this woman reveal? What proof could she possibly have? And more importantly, what would I do with that information once I had it? At 2:30, I told my mother's nurse I needed to run an errand. The security detail Damien had assigned to me was subtle but ever present. I'd have to lose them, which meant being smart about it. I took the subway, switching trains twice, ducking through crowded stations until I was certain I was alone. The coffee shop was quiet, nearly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. A woman sat in the back corner, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and careful maintenance. She was probably 50, beautiful in that severe way some women achieved with age and expensive help. "Marina," she said as I approached, not a question. "Sit." I sat, every nerve on edge. "Who are you?" "My name is Katerina Morozov, and Damien Constantine murdered my husband." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "5 years ago, Viktor Morozov, my husband, worked for Damien's organization. He discovered something, evidence of money laundering, connections to human trafficking, things that would have destroyed Damien's carefully constructed legitimate empire." Her eyes, ice blue and hard, bore into mine. Victor was going to go to the authorities. He never got the chance. They found him shot execution style in his car, and the evidence disappeared. "You can't prove that," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "Can't I?" She slid a manila envelope across the table. Financial records showing payments to known contract killers, text messages between Damien and his associates discussing the Morozov problem, security footage that was mysteriously deleted from official records, but that I managed to obtain through other means. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning documents that meant nothing to me individually, but that, when taken together, painted a damning picture. Text messages about cleaning up loose ends, bank transfers coded in ways that suggested something sinister, photos of Damien meeting with men whose faces bore the marks of violence. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're caring for his nephew, because I've been watching, and I've seen the way he looks at you, the way you're starting to look at him," Katerina leaned forward. "Because you remind me of myself before Victor died, a good woman trying to justify working for a monster by focusing on the good he does. But the good doesn't erase the evil, Marina. It just makes it easier to stomach. What do you want from me?" "Information. Access. A way to finally prove what Damien Constantine really is and see him pay for what he's done." Her voice hardened. "Help me, and I'll help you. I have resources, lawyers, connections. I can get your daughter back without you having to sell your soul to a murderer." It was everything I'd wanted, everything I'd been praying for. Proof that Damien was exactly as bad as I'd feared, justification for my doubts, and a way out that didn't involve compromising myself further. I should have taken the envelope, agreed to help, and thanked God for this opportunity to escape before I got in any deeper. But something didn't sit right. Something in Katerina's eyes. Too hard, too calculating. Something in the way this was all too convenient, too perfectly timed. "I need time to think," I said, standing abruptly. "You don't have time," Katerina snapped. "Every day you wait, you become more complicit in his crimes. Every day you risk—" "I said I need time." I grabbed the envelope. "I'll contact you." I left before she could argue, my mind spinning. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal for the darkness I'd just been shown. I walked for blocks, not paying attention to direction, just needing to move, to think. My phone rang. "Damien." "Where are you?" His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "I went for a walk, needed air. Alone, without your security detail, after I explicitly explained the dangers." A pause. "Where are you?" I rattled off the intersection, and he told me to stay put. 10 minutes later, an SUV pulled up, and Damien emerged looking more furious than I'd ever seen him. He practically dragged me into the vehicle, his grip on my arm firm but not painful. "Do you have any idea how reckless that was?" he demanded once we were moving. "The people I warned you about, the ones who took my sister, they've been watching this building, watching you, and you just walked out alone, made yourself an easy target." "I can take care of myself," I protested weakly. Clearly. His jaw was so tight I thought it might crack. "What were you thinking, Marina?" I should have told him about Katerina, about the meeting, about everything. Instead, I heard myself say, "I was thinking that I needed to remember who I am, what I stand for, that I needed to decide if I can really live with this." The envelope burned in my bag like evidence of betrayal. Damien's eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw past the anger to something deeper. Fear, maybe, or hurt. "And what did you decide?" he asked quietly. I didn't have an answer, because looking at him now, remembering his gentleness with Alexei, his understanding of my pain, the way he'd made me feel seen and valued for the first time in years, I couldn't reconcile that man with the one in Katerina's accusations. But I also couldn't ignore the evidence she'd shown me, couldn't pretend the darkness didn't exist. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know who you really are, Damien, and I don't know if I can trust myself to see clearly when you're involved." Something passed between us in that moment, heavy with meaning I couldn't fully decode. The SUV pulled into the building's underground garage, and reality came crashing back. I had decisions to make, loyalties to declare, a line to choose which side I stood on. But as Damien helped me out of the vehicle, his hand warm and steady on mine, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. It was already too late. I'd already chosen, whether I wanted to admit it or not. The question now was whether I could live with the consequences. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my nightstand like an accusation, Katerina's words echoing in my mind. Damien Constantine murdered my husband, but alongside those words, I heard others. Damien's voice, raw with grief. She made the mistake of trusting the wrong person. His gentleness with Alexei, his understanding of my pain. The way he'd looked at me in the SUV, not with anger, but with something that looked heartbreakingly like fear of losing me. At 3 a.m, I finally opened the envelope again, studying each document with a nurse's attention to detail. And that's when I began to notice things I'd missed in Katerina's calculated presentation. Dates that didn't align, text messages that could be interpreted multiple ways, financial transactions that proved nothing without context. More importantly, I noticed what wasn't there. No police reports, No actual evidence Damien had ordered anyone's death, just circumstantial pieces that created a narrative Katerina wanted me to believe. It reminded me of something my mother used to say. People don't show you the whole picture when they want you to see things their way. My door opened quietly, and Damien stood silhouetted in the hallway light. Can't sleep either? No, I admitted, making no move to hide the envelope. If this was going to work, whatever this was between us, it had to be built on honesty. He entered, closing the door behind him, and sat on the edge of my bed without asking permission. His eyes found the scattered documents, and something flickered across his face. Not anger, resignation maybe, or disappointment. Katerina Morozov, he said quietly, picking up one of the photos. I wondered when she'd make her move. So you knew she'd contact me? I suspected. She's been circling for months, looking for a weakness. He set the photo down carefully. Did you believe her? I wanted to lie, to spare us both the pain of honesty, but I couldn't. For a while, yes. She was convincing. The evidence seemed damning, he supplied. I'm sure it did. Katerina is very good at constructing narratives. She's had 5 years to perfect this one. Is it true? The question came out smaller than I intended. Did you kill her husband? Damien was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes distant. Viktor Morozov was stealing from me. Not just money, information, client lists, business operations, things that would have gotten people killed if they fell into the wrong hands. He wasn't planning to go to the authorities. He was planning to sell to the Volkov Bratva, our biggest competitors. That's not what Katerina said. Of course it's not. His voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. She's rewritten history to make her husband a hero and me a monster. It's easier than accepting that Viktor was a traitor who got himself killed playing both sides. So you admit you had him killed? No. The word came sharp, final. I had him arrested. I provided evidence to law enforcement about his activities. They were going to bring him in, offer him a deal to testify against the Bratva in exchange for reduced charges. He paused. He died before they could execute the warrant, shot in his car, just like Katerina said, but not by me, by the very people he was trying to sell to, because dead men can't testify. I stared at him, trying to read truth in his face. Can you prove that? Yes. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. Police reports, timeline of events, the federal investigation that died when Viktor did. I could have shown you all of this the first day, Marina, but I wanted you to choose to trust me. Not because I'd overwhelmed you with evidence, but because you believed in who I am. And who are you? I asked, my voice breaking. Because I don't know anymore. 1 minute you're this dangerous criminal everyone fears, and the next you're gentle with Alexei, kind to my mother, offering to help me get my daughter back. I don't know which version is real. Both. He set the phone aside and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I'm both, Marina. I do things that would horrify you. I won't lie about that. I operate in a world where violence is currency and loyalty is bought with blood, but I also love my nephew. I honor my debts. I protect what's mine. Those things aren't contradictory. They're just the reality of existing in my world. Your sister, I said suddenly, understanding dawning. Katerina mentioned her. The wrong person she trusted was Viktor Morozov. Damien's voice went hollow. Before he married Katerina, he was with my sister Elena. She loved him, trusted him with everything. When she discovered what he was doing, that he was using information she'd innocently shared to betray us, she confronted him. He got scared, went to the Bratva for protection, and Elena—" He stopped, composing himself. Elena tried to fix it, tried to negotiate with the Bratva, to convince them Victor was too dangerous to trust. She thought she could protect our family. Instead, they took her, used her as leverage, and when I refused to give them what they wanted— He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The grief on his face told me everything. "Katerina blames you," I said softly, "because if Victor hadn't worked for you, if he hadn't been tempted by that world, he'd still be alive. Elena would still be alive." "Yes." Damien's hand tightened on mine. "She's not entirely wrong to blame me. I brought Victor into this life. I didn't see what he was until it was too late. Those deaths are on my conscience, even if I didn't pull the trigger." The raw honesty in his voice shattered something in me. This was the truth Katerina couldn't show me, not the sanitized version of events that made heroes and villains, but the messy, complicated reality where everyone was both victim and perpetrator, where good intentions led to terrible outcomes, where love and violence were two sides of the same coin. "She wants me to spy on you," I admitted, "to gather evidence, help her build a case that would destroy you." "I know." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "And you should do it, if that's what you believe is right. I won't stop you, Marina. I won't threaten you or your mother or use Emma as leverage. If you want out, if you want to help Katerina, I'll arrange safe passage for you and let you go." Just like that? Just like that? His eyes met mine, and I saw the truth there. He meant every word. Because I won't become the kind of man who holds someone against their will. I've seen what that does to people, what it did to my sister. I won't perpetuate that cycle, not even to protect myself. I pulled my hand free, standing up and moving to the window. The city sprawled below us, all those lives playing out in buildings filled with their own moral compromises, their own choices between right and wrong. How many of them were really so different from me? How many faced impossible decisions with no clear answers? "Katerina offered to help me get Emma back," I said. "She said she has resources, connections, that she could make it happen without me having to compromise myself further." "She probably could," Damien agreed. "Katerina has considerable wealth and influence. She could absolutely help you fight for your daughter." But there's always a cost, Marina. Always strings attached. She'd own you, just in a different way than you think I do. And when she was done using you to hurt me, when you'd served your purpose, what then? Do you think she'd continue helping you out of the goodness of her heart? He was right, and I knew it. I'd seen the calculation in Katerina's eyes, the coldness that spoke of someone driven by revenge rather than justice. She didn't care about me or Emma. We were tools in her personal vendetta. "I hate this," I whispered. "I hate that there are no good choices, that everything is tainted and complicated and impossible to navigate without betraying some part of myself." Damien came to stand beside me, close but not touching. "Welcome to the real world. It's messy and gray and full of choices that cost pieces of your soul no matter what you decide." "How do you live with it?" I asked, turning to face him. "The weight of all those compromises, all those moral failures." "By holding on to the things that matter." His hand came up to cup my face, his touch gentle. "By protecting the people I love, even when the cost is steep. By trying to be better than the worst things I've done, even when I fail." His thumb brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "And by hoping that someday someone will see past the monster to the man underneath and choose him anyway." The air between us felt charged, heavy with everything unspoken. I should step back, maintain distance, keep this professional, but I didn't want to. For the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I felt truly seen. Not pitied for my struggles or judged for my failures, but understood in a way that went bone deep. "This is dangerous," I whispered, echoing what I'd said days ago. The most dangerous things usually are. His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. "But I'm giving you a choice, Marina. Walk away now, help Katerina if you want, and I'll ensure you and your mother are provided for. Or stay. Not because you're obligated, not because you're afraid, but because you choose this. Choose me. Choose us." Us. Such a small word for such an enormous concept. Choosing him meant accepting everything he was, the violence and the tenderness, the criminal and the protector. It meant complicity in a world I'd spent my whole life trying to stay separate from. It meant risking everything for something that might destroy me. But it also meant safety for my mother. A real chance to get Emma back, a home, a purpose, someone who understood the weight of impossible choices because he carried them too. It meant not being alone anymore in my struggles, my fears, my desperate love for the people I couldn't protect on my own. I kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and fierce and filled with all the confusion and fear and hope tangled in my chest. His arms came around me immediately, pulling me close, and for a moment everything else fell away. No Katerina, no moral dilemmas, no complicated history. Just this. His mouth on mine, his hands in my hair, the solid warmth of him anchoring me to something real. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. I'm staying, not because I don't have other options, but because I choose this. I choose you. The relief in his eyes was profound. "You're sure?" "No," I admitted. "I'm terrified and uncertain and still not entirely convinced this won't end in disaster. But I'm choosing it anyway. Because you're right, there are no perfect choices. Just the ones we can live with. And I can live with this." He kissed me again, softer this time, reverent. When he pulled back, his expression had shifted to something more serious. "Then there are things you need to know about my business, about the risks, about what staying with me really means. No more secrets, Marina. If you're choosing this, you get the whole truth." We talked until dawn, and Damien held nothing back. He told me about the legitimate businesses that funded the less legitimate ones, about the protection he provided to the neighborhood, keeping out more violent elements, about the lines he wouldn't cross: no drugs, no human trafficking, no harming innocents, but also about the violence that was sometimes necessary, the moral compromises that came with power, the reality of existing in a world where mercy was often seen as weakness. It was brutal in its honesty. There were moments I wanted to cover my ears, to return to comfortable ignorance, but I'd asked for truth, and he was giving it to me. Every ugly piece of the life I was choosing. "What happens with Katerina?" I asked as the sun began to rise. "She won't give up just because I didn't help her." "No, she won't." Damien's jaw tightened. "But she's played her hand too early. By approaching you, she's revealed her strategy. We can prepare, counter, protect ourselves." "Will you hurt her?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Despite everything, she's a widow seeking justice for her husband. Misguided justice, but justice nonetheless. I won't punish her for that. I'll just ensure she can't hurt the people I care about." The inclusion of me in that category sent warmth through my chest. "And Emma? Your offer to help me? Was that real or just manipulation to keep me here? It was real. He pulled out his phone, showing me documents I didn't understand. I've already had my lawyers begin investigating Marcus's finances. We've found several irregularities that could form the basis of a custody challenge. It won't be fast and it won't be easy, but I meant what I said. I'll give you the resources to fight for your daughter. Tears pricked my eyes. Why? What do you get out of this? The chance to be worthy of your faith in me. His voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard. My sister believed I could be more than what my father made me. She believed the family business didn't have to define who I was, and then she died because of my world, and I thought maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe I was just the monster everyone believed. He cupped my face. But you look at me and see something else, something worth choosing. I want to be that man, Marina. I want to deserve you. I kissed him again, tasting salt from tears I wasn't sure were his or mine. You don't have to earn me, Damien. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm just a person making the best choice I can with impossible options. Then let me help you make those choices a little less impossible. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. My days were filled with Alexei's laughter, with planting those sunflowers he wanted, with watching my mother grow stronger under Dr. Reeves's care. My evenings were spent with Damien, learning the complexities of his world, meeting the people who worked for him. Not monsters, but men and women trying to survive in a system that offered limited options. I learned that Damien's protection wasn't just about violence. It was about providing jobs to people no one else would hire, about funding community programs the city neglected, about being the safety net when official channels failed. It didn't excuse the darker aspects of his business, but it complicated the narrative I'd been carrying about good and evil. Katerina made one more attempt to contact me, a desperate phone call where she pleaded with me to reconsider, to help her. I listened to her pain, acknowledged her grief, but ultimately told her no. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. I truly am. But destroying Damien won't bring your husband back. It won't ease your pain. It will just create more casualties in a war that's already cost too much. She hung up without another word. 2 days later, I heard she'd sold her house and moved to Europe. Maybe to start over, or maybe to find new ways to pursue her vendetta from a distance. I hoped it was the former, but suspected the latter. Some wounds were too deep to heal with distance alone. 6 months after I'd broken that car window, my lawyers filed for custody revision. Marcus fought back hard, using every resource at his disposal. But Damien's team was better, more thorough, more relentless. The financial improprieties we'd found were just the beginning. The deeper they dug, the more secrets emerged. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, granting me joint custody with Emma living with me during the school year, I broke down in the courthouse hallway. Damien held me as I sobbed, his arms the only thing keeping me upright. You did it, he murmured into my hair. You got her back. We did it, I corrected, because it was true. I couldn't have fought this battle alone. Emma's first visit to our apartment, because I'd started thinking of it as ours now, not just Damien's, was awkward. She was 7 now, wary of me after years of her father's poisoning. But Alexei, with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood, immediately declared her his new friend and dragged her off to see his sunflowers, which had grown tall enough to touch the sky just like he'd wanted. Watching them play in the garden, Alexei's dark head bent close to Emma's lighter one as he explained the intricacies of proper sunflower care. Something loosened in my chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe broken things could be rebuilt, not back to what they were, but into something new and stronger for having been shattered. She has your smile, Damien observed, standing beside me. And her father's stubbornness, unfortunately. I leaned into him, letting his warmth surround me. Thank you for all of this, for giving me a chance to be her mother again. You never stopped being her mother, Marina. You just finally got the chance to prove it. That night, after Emma was asleep in the guest room we'd prepared for her visits, after Alexei had been tucked in with Mr. Flopsy and a kiss, I stood in our bedroom, because somewhere along the way I'd stopped pretending I wasn't sharing Damien's life completely, and thought about the path that had led me here. A broken window, a desperate choice, a terrified woman who'd acted without thinking about the consequences. That version of Marina seemed like a stranger now. She'd been so certain about right and wrong, so sure that people could be divided into good and evil, so naive about the complexity of survival in a world that offered no easy answers. I wasn't that woman anymore. I'd been transformed by impossible choices, by loving a man who existed in shades of gray, by learning that protection sometimes required violence, that love sometimes demanded moral compromise, that family could be built from the broken pieces of the lives we'd lived before. Damien found me there, wrapped his arms around me from behind. Regrets? Some, I admitted, but not about this, not about us. Good. He turned me to face him. Because I'm not letting you go, Marina Volkov. You're stuck with me now. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. His smile was soft, genuine, the one he reserved only for private moments. I love you. I probably should have kept things professional and distant. But I do. And I need you to know that, even if you can't say it back yet. My heart swelled, too big for my chest. I love you too. God help me, but I do. You're dangerous and complicated and probably terrible for me. Definitely terrible for you, he interjected with dark humor. But you're also kind when it matters, protective of the people you care about, and willing to fight for what's right even when the cost is steep. How could I not love you? He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I let myself sink into it, into him, into this life I'd chosen with clear eyes and full knowledge of what it meant. I would never be entirely at peace with every aspect of Damien's world, would always carry the weight of moral compromise. But I would also have this, love, family, a chance to protect the people who mattered most. Years later, when Emma graduated high school with Alexei cheering loudest from the audience, when my mother finally lost her battle with cancer, but did so peacefully, surrounded by love in a way she never would have without Damien's intervention, when I looked at the life we'd built from those broken pieces, I thought about that day. The day I broke a Mafia boss's car to save a trapped child. The day everything changed. The day I learned that salvation doesn't always come in forms we recognize, that love can bloom in the darkest soil, that sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only one worth making. I'd been terrified that day, certain I was making a terrible mistake. And maybe I was. Maybe choosing Damien, choosing this life, was the biggest mistake possible. But it was mine. My choice, my risk, my reward. And looking at the family gathered around our table, at the life we'd built together, at the love that had survived everything thrown against it, I couldn't bring myself to regret a single second. Some people might call what we had a deal with the devil, but to me, it looked like grace. Complicated, messy, morally ambiguous grace, but grace nonetheless. The kind that meets you where you are and offers a hand up, even when that hand bears scars from violence, even when accepting it means becoming part of something you never imagined for yourself. I took that hand, and it saved my life. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.